lot of things alike. I've actually seen something similar to that happen, to where somebody was working, where I was working, and well, they started to get caught and they disappeared. This person was just working, and I understood that they just had to take somebody's identity in order to work and send money back to their family. And I know that they weren't like emptying somebody's bank account or anything like that. They were simply posing as this other person so that they could work, which is a totally different motive. And my response to that is, if you'll just allow me,
go ahead,
is that if it was easy for people, I don't see why we can't make it so that people can quickly work here by giving them a background check. Because when you're desperate, a long wait for a green card just won't do. And I've heard the waits are years. I've heard different numbers up to 12. That just won't do for a desperate person. Has just no ability to wait that long. And so they have to do what they have to do to come here and work. And I say that if we just gave them a background check and send them over here to work, that it would be good. And also, some people tell me this, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree, and you might disagree just a little, that if we made it easy for people to go back and forth, and that this separation of staying over here and not returning would end, because people would want to be back with their families. And what I think even further is that we should make it easy for people to come with a quick background check, have them work for a period of time, and then make it so that they go back home with a chunk of change that they earned. It was taken out like Social Security would be taken out. They make an agreement to work here for 2 years. It's just an idea. And then they work here for 2 years, and then they go back with a big chunk of money so that they can go back home with everything they need to establish themselves well in their own country that they must obviously love, because I know I love my country. I think that would help with a lot of the problems that I've heard about, including families being separated forever, people coming over and then none of them wanting to go back. Do you at all agree with me in some?
I mean, I think that the real issue that we're running into right now, which was sort of portrayed in that video, if you could have heard the very beginning, he was talking about how he was brought here when he was 3 years old.
Right.
To him, Mexico isn't home.
It's not his home.
It's not his home.
That's right.
I mean, when I was 3, I was living, I think, in Florida. I don't know. I was a Navy kid, so I was everywhere. But, I mean, I barely remember where I was living when I was 3. And so I think, what we're seeing right now is record numbers of deportations. We're not seeing people actually anymore that are coming up from Central America to find work in the U.S. The economy's not here, right? The economy tanked. The migrant jobs basically went away. Instead, what we're seeing are people being brought from the interior and being deported.
I see.
So in comparison to even previous years with no more deaths, I mean, I hear people say to me, well, I don't speak Spanish, so I don't know what I would do for no more deaths. It's like, you don't need to speak Spanish.
Right.
What makes you think you need to speak Spanish anymore to work in Nogales? I mean, you go down to the aid stations, everybody speaks English. Right. Or at least enough people that it would be worthwhile for you to be there. And that's because people have been here so long. So when you're talking about somebody like him who's been here
totally
20 years,
right.
We're seeing record numbers of deportations.
I would still, and I agree with you, but I would still say that if we hadn't have had a system that makes it where you cross and it's dangerous to go back again, that he might not exist like that. He might have a multicultural aspect to him. But now that he's been here for that long, I agree with you. I mean, he has a certain kind of right that should be considered. And also, his identity theft problem was basically, like I said, he had to do that in order to work here, in order to improve himself, in order to make life better for his fiancée. And you know what? It's an extremely complex problem. But what has made it, in my opinion, so complex is that we've handled it very poorly.
Absolutely.
And we can split hairs, and but what are some things that I think? Here's some things that I think we can agree on is that we need a more human, and that's what you're working for. We can all disagree on little things, but the big thing is we need a humane immigration policy, and we don't have one. It's not fair to, for all those years, demand work from all these people and then not treat them right. And with our economy tanking, like you said, now we've got a whole new problem. So tell me just a little bit more about this new problem about people being deported and in these large numbers, and what kind of problems. Fill me in, educate me a little bit about that.
Well, one of the things that's happening, it's being challenged, was that Janet Napolitano, who is the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, right, said that Secure Communities is going to be mandatory by the end of 2012. And Secure Communities is a program where police who arrest people or cite them basically for any offense, so that includes, just misdemeanor traffic charges and stuff like that, will be run through the immigration system. So if they are undocumented people, they will be deported. Communities are challenging it. It's going through court.
Right.
I don't know that it will end up becoming mandatory, but that means that sanctuary cities no longer exist, sanctuary states no longer exist. And what that means for us in terms of No More Deaths work is that the people that we're seeing have been here 10, 15, 20. We've had someone who was here for 40 years.
Wow.
Who was deported, an older gentleman. I think he was about 65. So, I mean, at that point in time, when you have family that's back here, when he's got his fiance and a new baby and things like that, there is no wall that you can build. There is no militarization that you can have that is going to keep him from trying to cross and get back to his family.
No, I would agree.
It's just not going to happen.
It's human nature. I agree. Desperation and strong emotion, strong ties to your own country, which in his case it is. If he was here since he was 3, it's basically his country. Or strong elements of desperation, people. And I think that we should be a giving country that reaches out to people that are desperate and figures out a plan for them of some kind that is humane, which we obviously haven't done when it comes to our southern borders. And now we have all these problems. And you've painted a picture for me. And this picture tells me that as the years go on, I might have been here since I was 3, and I might be 40 years old. And before I felt relatively secure. Now I'm afraid, as a human being, a good human being, a good hardworking human being who's never really been a bad person, has been contributing to our society all this time. And now over the years, in the near future and happening right now, I'm finding myself afraid of being taken to a strange place that I don't know anything about because I came here when I was 3 and I don't have legal papers. And that's what you're telling me. Is that not correct?
Well, and I mean, I'll give you an example. So one of the people that we have interviewed that we did an anti-deportation campaign for, his parents were from, I think it was Venezuela, and his mother had him while they were migrating through Mexico to get to the U.S. So he was technically a citizen of Mexico. And they were going to deport him to Mexico, where he has no family, no ties. He does not speak Spanish. He's just like, what am I going to do in Mexico? Exactly. At that point in time, the only thing that you're going to do is try and get back to your family. That's really what happens. I mean, and I think it's a little bit of a different situation when it's like people are migrating for work or they're migrating for jobs than what we're seeing right now, which is you cannot expect that someone will not do whatever it takes
to get back
to their families.
To back home, get back to the family, and I agree. And also, what I would say is that what the public should understand is that if you've been here since you're 3, and this is your home, you're completely innocent. Absolutely 100% innocent. Nobody can point a finger at you and say, well, you shouldn't have done that. You were 3. So therefore, and what really pleases me is for people like that, you're actually taking a case-by-case situation and trying that these people are not deported. That's correct, right?
Right. I mean, we've tried to push comprehensive immigration reform. It's obviously not going to happen. So now it's sort of like, what do we do to protect our community? What do we do to protect people within Tucson? And we've done a lot of work with neighborhood committees and things like that, and people that are working on trying to ensure that their community is taking care of each other and that people know their rights and that people are protected and that people have access to immigration attorneys and that they're prepared, that they have deportation plans, that they have powers of attorney for their children. This is another part of the campaign. That they know who's going to take care of their property. I mean, the gentleman from Phoenix was saying that his car he couldn't have anyone take care of his car, so his car got towed. So I mean, everything that he's worked for is gone. Everything that he put together is gone. And I think when we get into a good immigrant, bad immigrant debate, I mean, my grandparents came over on a boat from Europe. Nobody bothered to do a background. If you arrived at Ellis Island, you're in.
Right.
You know, back in the day. So people say, well, they came here, you know, my family came here legally, your family's coming here illegally. All it took was the price of a ticket. You didn't need a visa, you didn't need passports. All you needed to do was show up at that point in time, and you were let in. And so now, somehow we're deciding that we're going to secure the border and then say this person's okay, this person's not okay. It's like, okay, well, what if you have 2 children? What if they're both citizens?
Right.
What if they're not citizens? You know, and I feel like when we get into that sort of debate, it for me personally, it's just that I believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And when I've talked to people about, you know, my personal philosophy, I say that I operate under the radical notion that all people should be treated like human beings.
That's great.
And that's just, I love that's that. Really what it comes down to.
And you know what? I can identify with what you're trying to tell me. You're trying to tell me that you feel that because our immigrants came so freely and the way things happened, you know, as far as the land wasn't necessarily ours to begin with, and you weigh all that together, you're saying that they should have the same rights that our ancestors had. Is what you're telling me, and I can identify with that.
And that people would naturally migrate, as they had for centuries before we ever put up a wall. You know, back and forth for jobs, back and forth for family situations.
In Europe, I've heard that people are very flowing back and forth in Europe. And you don't have a situation where anything's out of control, where there's no room to like build a house or something has gone totally wrong because everybody went to one spot. So what you're saying, and I think this is possible, that if we had a more free-flowing situation, everything would flow back and forth naturally and there would be nothing to worry about it when it came to populations and numbers. That people would simply go where the jobs were, they would go where the economy was.
Well,
and it
I
would
mean, that's
flow
what
back
was
and forth
happening
over
before
time.
we built a wall in the 90s. You know, I mean, that was, the border was open. People crossed over to see families, to go to weddings, to go to funerals.
Right.
You know, they just went back and forth. You go here for a job, you go back home. I mean, the situation has definitely changed. And I think it's changed in very, very scary ways for what it means in terms of people being at risk crossing the desert. When you have somebody who may remember crossing when they were 10 and they had to walk for maybe an hour. Now you're walking 3 days, you're walking 4 days because of the militarization on the border.
Wow, so you just brought something to my attention that I had never really considered. Even though it was illegal in the 90s to cross as an immigrant, it was still free-flowing, and that's what you've just told me. Is that not correct? You've told me that that in the 90s people went back easily, even though it was against the law, there was no enforcement, and so it was an easy thing to do and it allowed things to move freely. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I mean, I think that people move more freely than they do now. I mean, a lot of people that we talk to in border towns, sometimes people in border towns will have cards where they can go back and forth. If you have families on, you know, Nogales, Arizona and Nogales, Sonora, then you can have documentation to be able to go back and forth, but it actually becomes much more difficult. So if you want to go visit your grandmother when they put up the wall,
right.
you know, who's on the other side of the wall, it's actually much more difficult to get back into the U.S. even if you are a U.S. citizen.
So I'm going to try and put in a nutshell what your concept is so that I can understand it and the public can understand it and embrace it in your own way. What you're telling me is that if we just developed a fair system that wasn't so rigid, didn't go for good immigrant, bad immigrant, and was very free-flowing, more like Europe, that people would move naturally back and forth, and these problems that everybody fears about, you know what they are, no jobs, no room to build your house, no resources. You're telling me that those wouldn't happen because just the natural order of things. People go where the resources are, people go where the jobs. Is that what you're saying to me right now?
Yeah, and that's what's been happening forever. You know, I mean, Georgia's already, after their worse than 1070 law, you know, just went through, they're already starting to lose people, and there's nobody to go out and pick food in the fields. And it's like, well, I don't know a lot of American citizens who are actually looking forward to that lettuce picking job. I mean, they're just not. People have been used for centuries to go where the jobs are, you know, and you rely on unskilled, like low-paid labor to get food. I mean, we've done it forever.
Wow. So what I have to tell you this is you've altered my concepts just a little bit, because I get so much information about, oh, we're going to run out of jobs. We're going to, there's going to be no room. And we can't continue on with this. It was good back then, but it's bad now because there simply aren't the resources for it. I'm talking about and it's affected me. Now you're affecting me a little bit differently. That has affected me. I'll go, well, okay, if we're running out of resources, well, let's come up with a fair plan. But the fair plan kind of like good immigrant, bad immigrant. Now, what you're telling me is that to have a more free-flowing system like Europe and those fearful problems simply won't exist. And it's, I think I'm going to consider it. I think I would never have been against it, but I think it's bringing something new to my mind again. And I would invite you to listen to this if you feel like I have in the past that that we must do this to some extent and come up with a fair policy, but we have to protect our borders in order not to run out of resources. Maybe we should reconsider that and take a look at Europe and ask ourselves the question, well, are there countries in Europe that are being overrun with people and are running out of resources? And I think the answer is no. And if I'm correct about that, that means that you could very well be correct in your ideas. So thank you. So we have another video, do we not? Mm-hmm. And we'll go to that in a minute. So just let's move on to another subject that No More Deaths does. Since you've swayed me a little bit on that one, I think you've won that round. Give me another subject to work with.
I think the big thing that's coming out right now that was sort of brought up there was the abuse documentation that's been an ongoing part of our work, and it's been this enormous document that's going on, but we're trying to figure out sort of how we're going to continue that and how we're going to continue telling people stories about what's going on. So my next topic for you would be the fact that we have no real enforceable standards for Border Patrol, unlike what we have for police departments.
Right,
and
I've wondered about that, and I've suspected not, because I'll tell you that I know that we have these psych tests for our police officers, and I think that over the years our police force has improved because of our demand for this. Demanding police officers that have the right mindset for the job, and I think that we've made a lot of progress personally. I feel that over the years. And then I wonder, well, we had this flood of, so important to get all these Border Patrol people. And generally when you have a big rush to get a lot of enforcement of some kind, generally the stuff about psych testing and making sure that the people that have the right mindset for the job and the right motives and things like that, correct motives are, to protect and serve and not to harm, those kind of things, that kind of falls through the cracks. And what I'm beginning to understand is that it probably has already fallen through the cracks, that there is perhaps a lot of Border Patrol people out there that have the wrong motives. I'm sure that there's a lot of good-hearted Border Patrol people that they may agree or disagree with me on the Border Patrol issues, but their minds are in the right place. They think they're doing something good for the country and don't want to harm anybody. But what you're beginning to tell me is that some people may be a little different?
I wouldn't tell you that some people are a little different. I would tell you that the entire culture is different from what you think it is. And one of the things that we found are that like 85% of people are not actually being fed, not given food, and they're being held 24 hours.
85%?
85%. So I did the statistics for this, so I know it fairly well. One of the things that we found are that people who are being held for 24 hours or more are being handed a packet of crackers and told that's your food for the next 24 hours. I mean, I don't consider that to be a sufficient meal. And especially when people have been walking for a few days, that's one of the things that this man talks about in the video. We found that Border Patrol actually disproportionately denies water to children in comparison to other groups. And I don't think that it's a bad agent thing. I think that from the agents I've talked to, they feel justified in that if they can make the situation as horrible as possible for people and as terrifying as possible, then they won't come back, right? So that's the plan. So we pick people up, we scare them to death, we starve them, we don't feed them, we don't give them water, we drop them off back in Mexico and then hope that they won't cross again.
Right.
But if my daughter's on the other side of that fence, it doesn't matter what you do to me, which just sort of leads back to what I was saying earlier.
Exactly.
It doesn't really matter what you do to me. I'm going to go across the fence. So we have people that are starving, that are dehydrated, they have medical needs that are just simply not being taken care of. And it's not a case where it's a few bad agents. It's a case where this is a pervasive culture as part of their deterrence policy, and nobody's watching over it. And I think that as a community, I mean, I love Tucson, and there are a lot of things I love about living here. And I think that if Tucson was aware of this as a community, we would say, no, that's not okay for us.
I think we would.
You know, that's not okay. Like, we need, if you're going to be holding people for 24 hours, you actually have to feed them.
Yeah.
And that should just be a rule.
I think the people.
So I think that even people that I disagree with in terms of like having an open border and stuff like that, I mean, that's not really, No More Deaths has a lot of people who believe that we should have an open border, but that's not necessarily like what we believe as a group kind of thing. So that was just sort of me talking. But I think that as a community, we can all agree that people should be held in humane detention standards, that they shouldn't be physically abused, that they shouldn't be mistreated, that they shouldn't be psychologically abused.
Absolutely.
So I think that we as a community, like one of our current goals is to try and get not only national changes, because we're doing that through the abuse documentation, but also local changes of just making Tucson aware of what's happening out in the desert and what's happening like right in our backyards regarding people who have no enforceable standards.
I can tell you that talking with you and before doing a little of the reading that I did, looking at a couple of videos that I saw from your website, I was a little shocked and began to kind of feel that, like the water bottles being slashed was a shock to me. And I think I heard reference that perhaps the Border Patrol had something to do with it, and it was, to me, is illogical because people need that water to survive. That really, I mean, I'm a little shocked, to tell you the truth. I'd always figured that it was just a few bad agents. And the problem with the whole scare these people into not coming back is because you're dividing families. We all know that it's human nature that you can't divide families like that without resistance. People are going to come back to where their daughter is. It's just no matter how much you scare them. Another thing that concerns me is I know that this scare tactic is going to get out of control. People are going to start getting killed or already are being killed.
Being killed.
So, and these are human lives. And these are people that are like you and me. These are good people. These aren't bad people doing bad things, getting what they deserve. So we need to rethink this a little bit. And from what you're saying, and I don't doubt you. And I saw some stuff just the other night on your website that I wouldn't say is not true. That is beginning to point me in this direction. So let's all consider that. Let's all consider that there's a possibility that our Border Patrol is getting out of hand, that there's a culture that they may mean well of shocking people, but that's getting out of hand. People are losing their lives. It's not going to work. And like you said, the one thing that me and you can agree on, no matter what differences we may find we have in the future or right now, is that a border policy should be humane. If you're going to call yourself a humane country, a country of law and a humane country that's upstanding, you have to have a humane immigration policy. Otherwise, you're not a humane country if you don't have. Would you agree with that? You're not humane if you don't have a humane
Well, I mean,
border policy?
we've been found in violation of international human rights laws by the UN, by Human Rights Watch International, by Amnesty International, by the ACLU. Like the federal government policy on the border is inhumane according to all international law. What we're doing to people is inhumane according to all international law. I mean, I don't know how many times that we can say we need detention standards before we actually get detention standards. That we need to say, when you pick a 5-year-old up in the desert, the first thing you need to do is hand them a bottle of water.
Absolutely.
Particularly after they've been walking for 3 days.
They might die on you otherwise.
I mean, we see a lot of things that go on that are to me really scary. I wasn't aware of before I moved here. I mean, I moved here from the East Coast a couple of years ago, and I had no idea what was going on. And then I came here and I started working with No More Deaths, and I was like, "What? Are you kidding me? I mean, there's no way that my country would do this," which is naive on some level, but extremely true. And I think once you have 12,000 people that you've talked to, I mean, you just sort of...
You can't deny it anymore.
Yeah, it's not an isolated incident. It's not this person or that person. It's that we have a big problem. And I think another thing that's important to note are that people who are picked up by Border Patrol and people who are put through ICE detention centers and the private prison systems that they're being put through, I mean, the reason why 1070 happened is because people are making money off of it, and it's the private prison systems that are making money off of it. But people who are picked up by ICE and people who are picked up by Border Patrol are not being charged with a crime. So they don't have the right to an attorney. They don't have the same rights that you and I would have if we were picked up off the street, if they're not US nationals.
Right.
So they don't, unless they have certain forms that are filled out, they don't actually have the right to speak to anyone. So people get disappeared. They disappear into detention centers, they get moved around, we don't know where they go, we keep trying to find them for their family members who are talking to us.
Anything.
And there are no standards. Nobody knows what's going on. The U of A actually just released a report on children who have parents who are in ICE detention. And one of the things that all the social workers were saying was, we'd rather have parents in jail than ICE detention, because when parents are in jail, at least we can find them. That we don't know where people go, you know, so we have all these children in child protective custody because of record numbers of deportations. It just doesn't make any sense financially as a country.
No, it doesn't make any sense. But I will say I'm a little shocked, even though I had, you know, reviewed some of this information before and I was beginning to be exposed to it. I'm definitely shocked by all this, and I don't know. It sounds pretty bad. I'm going to look into it a little bit more. I'm going to become more aware of this. You know, one of the things that I did a little ditty where I said, we want to be China's friends, and friends don't let friends commit human rights violations. And of course, somebody said to me once, well, why do you do that? You know, I said, we got our own problems, and why are you diverting attention away from our problems? I said, well, you know what? I do think we want to be China's friends, and I think we should encourage China to be its best, and blase, blase. And I'm not going to turn my back on all these people just because we have problems ourselves. But now my mind is definitely focused a lot on, you know, what we're doing. It's a lot worse than I had originally thought, and it concerns me deeply. And I think I'm going to be going back to it several times, you know, on the media, for my own volunteer efforts, and perhaps you too will want to do the same thing. Perhaps you're going to be moved a little bit by all this, and you'll want to do something more. You'll want to look more into the media, or spend your volunteer or other resources more in that direction. So let's take a look in a moment at that other video. They'll let me know when it's ready. But I just have to tell you that you've educated me a great deal. I'm a little swayed, and I sure appreciate it, and I look forward to learning more, and I'll tell you about it as I learn more. But for right now, let's take a look at that other video.
Ya tiene mucho tiempo que fui, 14 años ahorita. Cortaba flor,
Qué bueno.
en florería. Cuidaba también, trabajé en un rancho de caballos,
Qué bueno.
cuidando caballos
¿En qué parte?
en California. Fue muy duro. Caminamos dos noches y un día. Se me hincharon muy feo los pies, se ampollaron. Ya no teníamos comida para comer, se nos acabó el agua. Ya no aguantaba caminar, a correr, pues caí al suelo. Ya no me quise mover, pues ya no aguantaba caminar, los pies ya no los sentía. Sí, me lastimé los pies,
¿Verdad? ¿Puede mostrarlo?
me corté la frente,
Y en esta parte también.
sí, también aquí, todo casi. Un día y una noche en la cárcel. Hay veces que le dan de comer a uno y hay veces que no. No me dieron de beber, nomás puro juguito chiquitito, nada más. Eso no estoy tan bueno, de salud, me rayé, me corrí. Luego esta parte se me hinchó donde pegué en un árbol, en un palo.
Y cuando entraste ya en la cárcel, ¿te llevaron y te atendieron con atención médica?
No,
No,
no me atendieron.
ni te ofrecieron.
No, ni me ofrecieron.
No. ¿Y pediste algo? Claro,
Pues sí,
que,
último-
claro que vieron, ¿no? La cara.
Sí, vieron la cara que estaba lastimado, pero nada más risa le dio a la amiga.
Cuando entraste en la cárcel, allá te dieron acceso a un teléfono para llamar a la familia, un
No.
abogado, consulado,
A ninguno,
ninguno.
a nadie le ofrecen teléfono, a nadie se le ofrece nada. La cárcel, por lo más lo que pasa uno es hambre.
Sí.
Es hambre en la cárcel. tenemos que sufrir mucho para querer pasar la raya, ¿no? Porque hay mucha gente que nunca viajea o nunca es emigrante, como hay mucha gente que no lo necesita, mucha gente que no tiene necesidad de salir se puede decir, de su casa, pero más no saben cómo sufre uno en la raya.
Well, I have to admit that it's all been a little surprising. Last night I was looking over some stuff on No More Death's website, and I saw accounts of people that needed medical treatment and the Border Patrol saying that they wouldn't receive it. It shocked me a little bit because I have always assumed that if I got picked up by the Border Patrol as an illegal immigrant and I needed medical attention, that I would get it. I just assumed it, just the humane, it's just the right thing to do. But I'm not correct in that assumption, am I?
No, we had, of the cases that we documented, actually only 14% of the people who needed medical treatment received it in our abuse documentation. So there were, I think it was 59 cases or something that Border Patrol actually provided medical treatment for people. If I'm remembering my statistics correctly. I ran them, but I should know them. So, I mean, it's one of those cases where I think for that, if we're giving people the benefit of the doubt, everybody argues about who pays. So if Border Patrol takes you to the hospital and then picks you up from the hospital, Border Patrol is actually sent your medical bill, if that makes any sense. If they don't take you to the hospital, then they don't get that bill. So it's sort of nobody understands who's actually financially responsible for what happens when people are receiving medical treatment out in the middle of nowhere by EMTs and whatnot. And I think that's, from their perspective, that would be their argument kind of thing. You know, it's like, well, we're not going to pay for this. But on the other hand, it's sort of the Good Samaritan laws, right? If somebody needs assistance, and then you provide it. I mean, I don't understand.
If I collapse outside on the sidewalk, I have to be taken care of. There is no who's going to pay for it.
Right.
If I collapse out there, somebody's got to take me to a hospital. It's a law. I can count on it. I'll go to a hospital. I'll be seen to, and nobody's going to at that point in time, you know, talk about that or at least deny me medical care. I'll be sent somewhere. So absolutely, I think the dollars and cents is, like you said, it's just trying to get around the problem. Well, that sounds just absolutely terrible, but a good reason to what No More Deaths is doing, a good reason to volunteer, a good reason to you know, give your resources to No More Deaths, like your time and other resources. And we can't talk about money, but we can talk about, you know, so let's talk a little bit volunteering and things that, you know, people can do, you know, to help out.
I mean, we always need volunteers, just in general, and it's one of those things where, because we're volunteer run, it sort of depends on who is picking up the phone, who's answering the emails, and how busy we are regarding how fast we get back to people. So if there's anybody who wants to answer emails, that'd be amazing. But we always need supplies. We always need people to help. Supplies that we generally need are things for blister treatment. So if you're out walking in the desert actually cooks your feet while you walk, and we're not talking about blisters like you've had on your feet before. I mean, we're talking blisters that cover the entirety of the bottom of your feet.
Oh, ouch.
So we have a need for like new skin coverings and things like that. We need socks. We always need socks. Just clean white athletic socks. We always need water. We always need migrant packs. There's a whole list that's available on the website of things that we always need. But I think, I mean, this sort of shows my naivety when I did a sock drive last summer with one of the old-time volunteers, and I was like, oh, we need socks. Well, I'll just go get socks. And he was like, no, we need about 6,000 pairs of socks.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wait, what? So just when you think about the scope of what No More Death does, you know, and
that's big.
Yeah, that we drop 30 to 40,000 gallons of water in the desert every year, and it expands every year.
Wow,
you know,
that's
so
a
we're
lot.
talking a lot of supplies.
Well, what that shows me, though, is that you're touching a lot of lives. You're saving a lot of people's lives. So that's something worth giving to. If they're, shouldn't you give to somebody who's actually saving individual lives, and lots of them? I think so. So consider that. So tell me a little bit more.
What do you want to know about? I feel like there's so much that we can talk about.
I tell you what. Let's talk about volunteer opportunities. Let's in a minute show my volunteer clip. I did a volunteer, little quick, and it just shows how easy it was. It was great. It was fun. I enjoyed it. So let's go to that clip as soon as we can. Let me know when it's ready. And in the meantime, go ahead and volunteer for No More Deaths. Go to www.nomoredeaths.org and volunteer. They're helping a lot of people because they're using up a lot of supplies to help save lives. So let's go see and take a look at that clip. So of recent, I volunteered for No More Deaths. And I plan on volunteering for them again and sharing this with you as well. What they asked me to do recently was go down to the historic Y and volunteer for a phone bank program they have. And this is what they informed me of along those lines. When people are deported, well, they're deported in a random way. They don't know exactly where they're going to be deported to. And a lot of these people are deported through the Texan border, which right now represents a very special problem. Because south of the border of Texas, the regions there, the gangs have more power than the government. And people that are freshly deported are snapped up by these gangs and coerced into gang activity, such as drug trafficking, gang violence, and even being hitmen. How would they do this? Well, they tell these people that they know where their relatives live that live in the United States, and that they'll kill them if they don't comply. Also, what they like to do is to kidnap people and then put them up for ransom. If the ransom money is not paid, they have no qualms with killing them, as they have proven many, many times over. Now, you must remember that these people that are deported are regular people like you and I. And these people come here out of desperation to provide their families with monetary needs, and their other relatives as well. And then, once caught here illegally and deported through Texas, they find themselves in this very, very undesirable situation that is inhumane. Also, one must consider that when they're, taken up by these gangs and used like that it provides gangs with, fuel and labor and makes them stronger. There is, however, a partial solution to this problem, and that is to put a moratorium on deporting people through the Texas right now, and deporting them in areas that are safer for the moment. Now, if this rings a bell with you and is logical to you like it is to me, then there's something that you can do about it. You can contact No More Deaths at www.nomoredeaths.org and ask them how you can help with this. And also you can help with many other things concerning No More Deaths. And even worse, they're sometimes kidnapped, and then they're held for ransom, and if the ransom is not paid, these people are killed. And what we got to remember is that these people are basically very often desperate people looking for work to feed their families. And they are deported for, violating our laws. But when they're deported, these regular people are being tossed in the hands of gang violence and put in a situation we would not want any desperate person trying to feed their family to be thrown in. So a possible, short-term partial solution to this is to deport these people in areas that for now are safer. And they're less likely to, find themselves in these extremely undesirable situations that they in no way deserved or asked for. So I'm just letting you know this, expressing my concerns and asking that you take this into consideration. And also that if you have any concerns, to please contact No More Deaths through their website. So anyway, I sure appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a very nice day. Okay, bye-bye for now. Well, as you can see, I've been volunteering for No More Deaths just very recently. And I've been learning a great deal, and I've been shocked by the information that I've been getting even here on this show that Kat has told me. So Kat, thank you for shocking me and shifting my mindset a little bit. And I sure appreciate your efforts. And what's the one thing you want to tell everybody as we go out?
I want to tell them that there is a lot of different ways that people can get involved. There are a lot of different things that are going on, and it changes every day. It changes all the time. And so if there's something that needs to be done, then we'll do it, and we always need help doing it.
I sure appreciate it. And goodbye, everybody. We had a great time, and thank you so much.
Thanks.
I learned so much. Absolutely.